Your Honor, it'll $4,000. I can Venmo it right now. Are we done, or is this the lecture part?
You didn't just watch a verdict. You watched the precise moment when a man who believed he owned the future collided with the only force that could stop him, the law. I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have looked into the eyes of cartel lieutenants, gang leaders, and hardened killers. Usually, I see fear. Sometimes, I see anger. But nothing prepared me for the expression I saw on the morning of November 12th at exactly 9 a.m. It wasn't hatred. It was boredom. The man standing before me was Elias Vane. If you read the financial news, you know the name. He is the 29-year-old CEO of Ether, a data mining company worth $4 billion. He was the golden boy of Silicon Valley, the visionary who claimed his algorithms could predict human behavior better than we know ourselves. But in my courtroom, he wasn't a visionary. He was case number 492 CV, a defendant charged with contempt of court for failing to pay a wage dispute settlement. When Vane walked in, he didn't just enter a room, he insulted it. He didn't wear a suit. He wore a plain black t-shirt that I later learned cost $600, gray sweatpants, and limited edition sneakers. He didn't look at the flag. He didn't look at the bailiff. He looked at his phone, scrolling through messages as if the proceedings were an annoying commercial break in the movie of his life. Beside him was his legal counsel, Marcus Sterling. Sterling is the kind of lawyer who doesn't just know the law, he knows how to bend it until it breaks. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and he carried himself with the exhausted patience of a man used to cleaning up expensive messes. But then I looked at the plaintiff. Sitting across the aisle was Marcus's antithesis. Her name was Linda Morales. She was a 52-year-old former janitor at Ether's headquarters. Linda had been fired 6 months ago, allegedly for misconduct, but in reality, because she had refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding unsafe chemical storage in the server rooms. Linda wore her Sunday best, a simple, pressed floral dress that she had likely owned for a decade. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. She looked terrified, not of me, but of the man in the sweatpants who hadn't even acknowledged her existence. The dispute was over $4,500 unpaid severance and medical costs for a respiratory infection she caught cleaning those server rooms. To Elias Vane, that amount is what he spends on a business lunch. To Linda, it was rent. It was survival. All rise, the bailiff announced. Everyone stood up. Everyone, except Elias Vane. He remained seated, thumb still tapping on his screen. His lawyer nudged him, whispering urgently. Vane sighed, a loud, theatrical sound that echoed in the silent room, and slowly dragged himself to his feet, not even bothering to lock his phone screen. I sat down and arranged my files. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to see how long it would take for him to realize where he was. He didn't look up. "Mr. Vane," I said. My voice was low. I don't need to shout to be heard. "Are we interrupting your schedule?" Vane finally looked up. He didn't look at me with respect. He looked at me like I was a glitch in his software. He smirked a faint, condescending twitch of the lip. "Honestly, Judge," he said, his voice casual, "bored?" "Yeah, a little bit. I have a board meeting in Tokyo in 3 hours, and my jet is idling. Can we speed run this?" I assume Sterling here already wrote the check. He gestured to his lawyer like one would gesture to a servant. "It's a $4,000 fine, right?" Vane continued, reaching into his back pocket. "I don't carry cash, but I can Venmo the court if that gets me out of here faster." The courtroom froze. My clerk stopped typing. The bailiff's hand drifted instinctively to his belt. In 40 years, I have seen defiance. I have seen rage, but I have never seen someone treat the United States Court of Law like a drive-through window. I took off my glasses. I looked at Elias Vane. I looked at Linda Morales, who was trembling. "Mr. Vane," I said, "put your phone away. And Mr. Sterling, explain to your client why he is actually here. Because I don't think he understands that the checkbook he is reaching for isn't going to fix what is about to happen." Mr. Sterling stood up immediately. He smoothed his tie, a nervous tick I had seen 100 times in men who realized they were standing on a trapdoor. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with practiced contrition, My client apologizes for his lack of decorum. He is under immense pressure regarding the upcoming merger with Cyberdyne. We have the settlement check right here, $4,500 plus interest. We can hand it over to Miss Morales immediately, and we can all go about our day. It was a good performance. Sterling was trying to buy his way out of the room before Vane said something that cost them more than money, but he was too late. The atmosphere in the room had already shifted. It wasn't just a courtroom anymore, it was a hunting ground. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my clasped hands. Mr. Sterling, I said, you seem to be under the impression that this is a transaction. It is not. This is a hearing for contempt. And your client has done nothing but prove the charge since he walked through those doors. Vane laughed. A short, sharp sound. Okay, look, he said, interrupting his own lawyer. He turned to Linda. For the first time, he actually looked at her. Linda, right? Look, I'm sorry you got fired. I'm sorry you, whatever, got sick. But let's be real. You emptied trash cans. My code runs the global economy. My time is worth $50,000 a minute. So, can you just take the check and stop pretending this is about justice? It's about a payday. We both know it. Linda flinched as if he had slapped her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. She possessed a dignity in her silence that Vane would never be able to purchase, no matter how many billions he acquired. The courtroom went deadly quiet. Even Sterling looked pale. He knew. He knew that you do not say that in a court of law. Not in my court, and certainly not when the judge is looking for a reason to peel back the layers of your life. I didn't yell. I didn't bang my gavel. I simply opened the file in front of me. It was a thick file, much thicker than a standard wage dispute folder. Mr. Vane, I said softly, you think Miss Morales is here for a payday. You think she is irrelevant because she emptied your trash cans. But you see, that is where you made your fatal error, because the people who empty the trash see everything. They see what you throw away. Vane rolled his eyes, checking his watch again. Is this the moral lecture part? Because my pilot is texting me. No, I replied. This is the evidence part. I pulled a document from the file. Miss Morales was fired for misconduct, specifically for entering a restricted server room. Is that correct? She wasn't cleared for that area, Vane snapped. Corporate security policy. We deal with sensitive user data. We can't have cleaning staff wandering around the mainframes. And yet, I continued, according to her affidavit, she was ordered to clean that room by your facility manager because a cooling system had leaked. A cooling system containing ethylene glycol, a toxic chemical. She wasn't given protective gear. She got sick. And when she asked for workers' compensation, you fired her and tried to make her sign a non-disclosure agreement. An NDA that would ban her from ever mentioning the leak. Vane's face didn't change, but his thumbs finally stopped moving on his phone. Standard procedure, he said, to protect trade secrets. Trade secrets, I repeated. Is that what we are calling poisoning employees now? Sterling jumped in, his voice rising an octave. Objection, Your Honor. This is a wage dispute hearing. These allegations are unproven and outside the scope of. Overruled, I cut him off. Mr. Sterling, your client is here for contempt. That means I get to decide if he respects the authority of this court. And right now, his behavior suggests he believes he is untouchable. I am simply establishing the context of his arrogance. Because I need to know, does Elias Vane believe he is above the law because he is rich? Or does he believe he is above the law because he thinks no one is watching? I looked directly at Vane. You offered to Venmo the court. You treated Miss Morales like an inconvenience. But here is the thing about the law, Mr. Vane. It doesn't care about your merger. It doesn't care about your jet. It cares about facts. And the fact is, you just admitted in open court that you view this woman's suffering as a business expense. Vane finally locked his phone. He put it in his pocket. He crossed his arms and leaned back, that smirk returning, though it looked a little tighter now. So what? He challenged. You going to lecture me? Fine. Lecture over. Can I go now? Or are you going to fine me another $1,000 for hurting her feelings? He truly didn't get it. He thought this was the ceiling of my power. He thought the worst I could do was take a little more of his pocket change. He had no idea that I wasn't looking at his wallet. I was looking at his crown. and I was about to reach for it. You want to know if I am going to fine you another $1,000, I said, my voice dropping to a register that usually makes defense attorneys check their exits. Mr. Vane, if this were just about $1,000, we would have finished 10 minutes ago. But you opened a door, and now we are going to walk through it. I picked up a sealed plastic evidence bag from the top of the stack. Inside was a piece of paper. It was wrinkled, stained with coffee, and taped together in 3 places. It looked like trash. Because it was, Miss Morales didn't just empty your bins, I continued. She paid attention. On the night she was exposed to the chemical leak, she found this in the wastebasket of the server control room. Do you recognize it? I held the bag up. Vane squinted. For the first time, the boredom left his face, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. Then, recognition hit him. His eyes widened, just a fraction. He looked quickly at Sterling, his lawyer. Sterling looked at the bag, then back at Vane, his face draining of color. I have never seen that in my life. Vane lied. It was a bad lie, the kind a child tells when they are holding the broken vase. That is strange, I said, sliding the bag toward the clerk, because it appears to be a printout of an internal memo sent from your terminal at 8:45 p.m. on the night of the incident. It is addressed to the head of infrastructure. Would you like me to read it to the court? Sterling jumped up. Your Honor, I object. This evidence was not disclosed in discovery. We have had no time to authenticate. This is a small claims court hearing regarding unpaid wages, I interrupted, my voice sharp as a scalpel. Discovery rules are flexible when the evidence is brought by a pro se litigant who found it in the garbage you threw at her. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. Sterling sat. He knew he was drowning. I put on my glasses and read from the wrinkled paper. Subject: thermal criticality. Body: rerouting cooling is taking too long. If the servers throttle, the predictive model for the Tokyo presentation will lag. Override the safety protocols on the HVAC system. Vent the excess heat and glycol pressure into the maintenance corridor. I don't care about the alarms. Just keep the system green until the market closes. Signed, EV. I took off my glasses. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. Linda Morales was looking at the floor, wiping a tear. She had known. She had known she was poisoned, not by accident, but by a decision. Vent into the maintenance corridor, I repeated. That is where Miss Morales was working. You didn't just have a leak, Mr. Vane. You manually vented toxic gas into a room occupied by your staff because you didn't want your computer to slow down. Vane scoffed, but it sounded forced now. He shifted in his seat, the leather creaking loudly. This is ridiculous, he spat. It's a fabricated email. Anyone could type that. And even if it were real, which it isn't, it was a business decision. We were running a simulation that affects stock prices. The maintenance corridor is supposed to be empty at night. It's not my fault she was in there. It's not your fault, I echoed. You vented poison to save stock prices. You admit that? I admit that running a $4 billion company requires making hard choices, Vane shouted, finally losing his cool. He stood up, slamming his hand on the table. You think you can judge me? You sit here in this dusty room making 60 grand a year, deciding who pays for a broken fence. I build the future. If a few janitors get sick so that humanity can advance, that is the cost of progress. It's collateral damage. He stopped. He realized he was shouting. He realized everyone was staring. Collateral damage, I said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Thank you, Mr. Vane. You just gave me everything I needed. For what? Vane sneered, adjusting his t-shirt, trying to regain his composure. To raise the fine to 10 grand? Do it. I'll write the check now. I'm done with this circus. He reached for his checkbook again. He thought he had won. He thought he had just explained the way the world works to a simple public servant. Mr. Sterling, I said, ignoring Vane, I have a question for you. Since your client just admitted on the record to prioritizing stock value over human safety, and since he admitted to overriding safety protocols, that would constitute gross negligence and willful endangerment, correct? Sterling didn't answer. He was staring at his hands. And I continued, since he ordered this override to manipulate stock prices before a market close, that sounds an awful lot like securities fraud, does it not? Vane laughed. You can't charge me with fraud in a wage court. You don't have the jurisdiction. You're a municipal judge. You handle parking tickets and petty theft. Know your place. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You are right, Mr. Vane. My jurisdiction is limited. I cannot charge you with federal crimes, but I do have authority over the assets involved in the case before me. And since you claim that your company's survival justified your actions, you have made the company itself part of this trial. I picked up my gavel. I didn't bang it. I just held it. And there is one other thing you forgot about my dusty room, I said. We have phones here too. Phones? Vane repeated, looking around the room as if he expected a SWAT team to burst through the ceiling. When nothing happened, he let out a scoff of relief. You're bluffing. You're trying to scare me. It's cute, really, but I have a flight to catch. Sterling, handle the check. I'm leaving. He turned his back on me. He actually turned his back on the bench and started walking toward the aisle. Deputy, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The bailiff, a man named Jim Miller, who used to be a linebacker for the state university, stepped in front of the swinging gate. He didn't draw his weapon. He just crossed his arms. He was 6'4" of absolute immobility. Vane stopped. He looked at the deputy, then back at me. Am I under arrest? He demanded. Because if I'm not, you can't hold me here. That's unlawful imprisonment. I'll sue this county into the Stone Age. You are not under arrest, Mr. Vane, I said calmly. Not yet. But you are also not free to leave, because we haven't determined the assets required to satisfy the judgment of this court. The judgment is $4,000, Vane screamed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. He threw a wad of $100 bills onto the defense table. It scattered like confetti. There's $5,000. Keep the change. Are we done? I looked at the money on the table. Then I looked at Linda. She hadn't moved. She was staring at the cash with a mixture of fear and insult. Pick it up, I said to Vane. What? Pick it up. My voice echoed off the wood paneling. This is a court of law, not a strip club. You do not throw money at people. Pick it up, or I will hold you in contempt and put you in a cell until you learn how to bend at the waist. Vane stared at me, his face turning a blotchy red. He looked at Sterling. Sterling gave him a tiny, imperceptible nod, the universal lawyer signal for do what he says or we are both dead. Slowly, agonizingly, Elias Vane bent down. He scrambled on the floor, picking up the bills. It was the first time in likely a decade that he had been on his knees. When he stood up, thrusting the messy stack of cash at his lawyer, he looked murderous. You happy? He hissed. Now let me go. Not quite, I said. You see, Mr. Vane, you made a very interesting legal argument earlier. You said that venting the poison was a business decision to protect the company's stock price. You argued that the harm done to Miss Morales was necessary for the survival of the corporation. So what? So, I continued, leaning back, that admission triggers a very specific, very obscure legal precedent regarding liability. Usually, a CEO is protected by the corporate veil. It means if the company does something wrong, the company pays, not the person. It protects your personal assets. But there is an exception. It is called piercing the veil. Sterling let out a low groan. He dropped his head into his hands. When a CEO uses the corporation as a direct instrument of their own will to commit a crime or cause harm, I explained, the company stops being a separate entity. It becomes a weapon. And in my courtroom, when a weapon is used to harm a victim, I have the authority to confiscate it. Vane looked confused. Confiscate. What? The email? Take it. I don't care. No, Mr. Vane, I said. I'm not talking about the email. I'm talking about the weapon. You said the company required you to hurt Miss Morales. Therefore, the company is the instrument of harm. And since you just admitted the company is essentially you, I am claiming jurisdiction over the instrument. I picked up a pen. I opened a new form. It was a form I rarely used. It was usually reserved for seizing vehicles used in drug trafficking. But the law is a beautiful thing. It is open to interpretation. I am hereby issuing a writ of attachment, I announced, writing as I spoke. I am freezing all assets of Aether Incorporated within the state jurisdiction pending a full audit of your safety protocols. And to ensure those assets, including the servers you were so worried about, are not tampered with, I am appointing a temporary receiver to manage the company effective immediately. Vane blinked. He looked like I had just spoken in an alien language. Receiver? What? What does that mean? It means, I said, looking up with cold satisfaction, that as of this moment, you are no longer the CEO of Aether. You don't have the authority to write a check, fire an employee, or even enter the building. The court runs your company now. Vane stood frozen. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. You can't do that. It's a $4 billion company. You're a municipal judge. You can't seize a tech giant over a janitor's lung infection. Watch me, I said. And Mr. Vane? About that phone call I mentioned earlier? I pointed to the phone on my bench. The line was lit up red. I didn't call the police, I said. I called the state attorney general. He has been on speakerphone for the last 5 minutes, and he is very interested in your definition of business decisions. A voice crackled over the speakerphone on my bench. It was deep, authoritative, and terrifyingly calm. Judge Boyd, the voice said, this is Attorney General Harris. I am here, and I have heard enough. Elias Vane stared at the small black speaker box as if it were a bomb counting down. For a man who lived his life on screens and devices, he looked utterly betrayed by technology. Mr. Vane, the Attorney General continued, his voice filling the silent courtroom, based on your admission of willful negligence and securities fraud, specifically the manipulation of infrastructure to artificially inflate stock value, I am authorizing a probable cause warrant for Aether's headquarters. My team is entering your facility in Palo Alto as we speak. They are securing the servers, and they are looking for that maintenance log. Vane spun around to his lawyer. Marcus, stop them. Call the board. Do something. But Marcus Sterling didn't reach for his phone. He didn't object. He didn't argue jurisdiction. He did something that happens only when a lawyer realizes his client is radioactive. He started packing his briefcase. I cannot stop a criminal warrant based on a confession you made in open court. Elias, Sterling said, his voice cold. And given that you just implicated the company in a felony to save stock prices, I have to advise you that my firm represents Aether Incorporated, not you personally. Conflict of interest rules are very clear. You work for me, Vane screamed, veins bulging in his neck. I pay you $800 an hour. You paid me, Sterling corrected, snapping his briefcase shut. But as the judge pointed out, your assets are frozen, and I don't work on credit. Sterling looked at me, gave a stiff, respectful nod, and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him, leaving Elias Vane standing alone in his $600 t-shirt. I have seen men break in my courtroom. Usually, they cry, they beg. But sociopaths don't break like that. They glitch. Vane looked around the room, his eyes darting frantically, trying to find an angle, a loophole, a button he could press to reset the simulation. This is illegal, Vane stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You trapped me. You baited me. This is entrapment. It is not entrapment to ask a man why he poisoned his employee, I said. And it is not a trap when you build the cage yourself. You were so desperate to prove how smart you were, how little we mattered, that you handed us the keys. I looked down at Linda Morales. She was watching Vane, her expression unreadable. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a victory lap for her. It was a revelation. She was realizing that the monster who had destroyed her livelihood was just a small, scared boy without his money. Now, I said, we have the matter of the receivership. Since the Attorney General is seizing the physical evidence, someone needs to manage the company's daily operations to ensure the remaining employees, the ones you haven't poisoned, get paid. Vane scoffed, a desperate, wet sound. Who are you going to appoint? Some bureaucrat, some government accountant who doesn't know code from coffee? You'll tank the stock in an hour. You'll destroy billions in value. I am aware of the complexity, I replied, which is why I am appointing a special master with intimate knowledge of Aether's infrastructure. Someone who knows the building, the schedules, and the safety protocols better than you do. Vane looked confused. Who? My COO? He's in London. No, I said. I am appointing Miss Linda Morales as the interim trustee for the purpose of safety, compliance, and wage audits. The silence that followed was absolute. Vane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Linda looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Her? Vane finally choked out. The janitor? You're putting the janitor in charge of my company? She isn't a janitor anymore, I corrected. She is the plaintiff in a successful suit against you. And unlike you, she actually reads the safety memos. Miss Morales, do you accept the temporary appointment to oversee the safety audit of the facility? Linda stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she held her head high. She looked at Vane, then at me. I don't know how to run a tech company, Judge, she whispered. You don't need to run the code, Miss Morales, I told her gentle. You just need to make sure no one else gets hurt. Can you do that? Linda took a deep breath. She smoothed her floral dress. Yes, Your Honor, I can do that. Good, I said. Clerk, issue the order. Miss Morales now has badge access to all restricted areas, including the executive suite. Vane looked like he was going to be sick. You're letting her into my office? My private office? It's not your office right now, I reminded him. It's the state's evidence locker, and she has the key. Vane lunged. It was a stupid, desperate move. He grabbed for his phone on the defense table, perhaps to delete something, perhaps to make a transfer before the freeze hit the banks. Don't, the bailiff shouted. Vane's hand touched the phone, but before he could unlock it, Deputy Miller had him. It wasn't a gentle restraint. Miller grabbed Vane's wrist and twisted, pinning him against the table. The phone skittered across the floor, sliding right to the feet of Linda Morales. Get off me, Vane yelled, thrashing. I am Elias Vane. I own this city. Mr. Vane, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. You are now adding resisting a court officer to your list of problems. Deputy, is he in custody? He is now, Your Honor, Miller grunted, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked. It was a cold, final sound. I looked at the billionaire CEO, pressed cheek first against the table where he had thrown his money just minutes ago. Mr. Vane, I said, you claimed your algorithms could predict human behavior. Tell me, did your model predict this? When you strip a man of his billions, when you take away the private jet, the lawyers, and the entourage, you realize how little of him is actually left. As Deputy Miller hauled Elias Vane off the table, the visionary of Silicon Valley didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a child who had just been told that playtime was over forever. Vane wasn't fighting anymore. The fight had left him the moment the handcuffs clicked. He stood there, slumped, breathing hard, staring at the floor. But there was one loose end, the phone. It was lying on the carpet, screen up, right next to Linda Morales's sensible, worn-out shoes. The device that controlled an empire. The device he had tried to destroy rather than let us see. Linda bent down. She picked it up. She didn't look at it. She didn't try to unlock it. She held it like it was a piece of radioactive waste. Miss Morales, I said gently, please hand that to the deputy. It is now Exhibit A in a federal investigation. Linda walked over to Deputy Miller. As she passed Vane, he looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, I thought he might spit at her or curse her, but he didn't. He looked at her with something worse than hate. He looked at her with recognition. For the first time, he actually saw her. He realized that the woman he had poisoned, the woman he had fired, the woman he had called trash, was the one holding the smoking gun of his entire life. I'm sorry, Vane whispered. It wasn't a real apology. It was a transaction. He was trying to buy mercy with a word. Linda stopped. She looked at him, then at the phone in her hand. You're not sorry you hurt me, Mr. Vane, she said, her voice shaking but clear. You're sorry I didn't sign the paper. She handed the phone to the deputy. Miller bagged it. Take him to holding, I ordered. As they led Vane out through the side door, the prisoner's door, not the CEO's exit, the silence in the courtroom was heavy. It was the sound of a vacuum where a massive ego used to be, but the silence didn't last long. The speakerphone on my bench crackled again. Judge Boyd, the Attorney General's voice cut in. Are you still there? I am here, General, I replied. Mr. Vane is in custody. The phone is secured. Good, the general said, because my team just breached the server room at Aether, and Judge, you need to know what we found. It wasn't just a cooling leak. I leaned forward. The entire gallery leaned forward with me. Explain. The maintenance log Vane tried to hide? It wasn't about keeping the servers running for a presentation, the general said. We found a kill switch installed on the HVAC system. The command Vane sent wasn't to vent the heat to save the computers. It was designed to overheat the drives intentionally. A murmur ran through the courtroom. He wasn't trying to save the stock price by keeping the system up, the general continued. He was trying to melt the hard drives. He was trying to physically destroy the data cores. The venting that poisoned Miss Morales was a failed attempt to incinerate evidence of what Aether was actually doing with its user data. I felt a cold chill. This was no longer just about negligence. This was about a cover-up on a massive scale. What data was he trying to burn, General? I asked. Everything, the voice replied grimly. We are still decrypting, but it looks like illegal biometric harvesting. Voice patterns, facial recognition, behavioral prediction models, all collected without consent from millions of users. And he was selling it. The Tokyo meeting wasn't a board meeting. It was a handover. I sat back in my chair. The pieces fell into place. The arrogance, the desperation, the way he had treated a $4,000 fine like an insult. He hadn't been afraid of paying the money. He had been afraid that if anyone looked too closely at his company, even a janitor, even a municipal judge, they would see the rot underneath the gold paint. I looked at Linda Morales. She was still standing at the railing, looking stunned. She had thought she was fighting for severance pay. She had actually stopped a digital catastrophe. Miss Morales, I said. She looked up, startled. Yes, Your Honor? It appears your misconduct in entering that room didn't just expose a safety violation. I said. It prevented a felony. You didn't just save yourself. You saved the privacy of half the country. Linda didn't know what to say. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Sit down, Miss Morales, I said. We aren't done yet, because while Mr. Vane is in a cell, his legacy is still standing. And as the receiver of his company, I have one more order for you to execute. I picked up my pen again. I wasn't writing a judgment this time. I was writing a death warrant for a corporation. General, I said to the speakerphone, do not let that data leave the building. Seize everything. And tell your agents that if anyone from the board of directors tries to interfere, they answer to me. Understood, Judge, the general replied. The line clicked dead. I looked at the empty defense table where Elias Vane had sat. His expensive leather briefcase was still there, abandoned by his lawyer. His water bottle was still there. It was a tableau of a life interrupted. Clerk, I said, update the docket. The charge is no longer contempt. Amend the record to include conspiracy to commit wire fraud, destruction of evidence, and reckless endangerment in the first degree, and set bail. My clerk looked at me, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What amount, Your Honor? I thought about the $4 billion Vane claimed he was worth. I thought about the $60 shoes on Linda's feet. I thought about the concept of value. No bail, I said. Remand him to the county jail until federal arraignment. He wanted to see the inside of a cell. Let's make sure he gets the full tour. But the story didn't end there, because 2 days later, I received a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer. It wasn't from the Attorney General. It was from Elias Vane. The letter wasn't typed on a tablet or dictated to a secretary. It was scrawled in pencil on cheap yellow legal paper, the kind they sell in the jail commissary for $1. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. It looked like the scratching of a man who had lost his mind. I sat in my chambers, holding the paper. I expected a confession. I expected a plea for mercy. I expected him to beg for a deal. But Elias Vane didn't write to me about his freedom. He wrote about his machine. Judge Boyd, the letter read, you don't understand. You can't let the Attorney General shut down the core. The algorithm isn't just code. It learns. It's alive in a way you can't comprehend. If they cut the power, it dies. Years of data, years of evolution gone. Please, keep me in jail. Take my money. Just sign an order to keep the cooling system running. Don't kill it. It's the only thing that matters. I put the letter down. Even facing 20 years in federal prison, even with his reputation in ashes, Vane didn't care about Linda Morales. He didn't care about the laws he broke. He cared about his digital child. He was so obsessed with the artificial intelligence he had built that he had forgotten what real intelligence looked like: empathy. I didn't reply to the letter. Instead, I called the temporary receiver. "Miss Morales," I said when she answered the phone. "Where are you?" "I'm in the building, Judge," Linda said. Her voice sounded different now. Stronger. "I'm with the federal agents in the server room. They are asking for permission to power down the mainframes to extract the hard drives safely." "Mr. Vane seems to think that turning off the machine is a tragedy," I told her. "He sent me a letter begging to save it." "I saw the letter he wrote to the board, too," Linda replied quietly. "He told them to fire me again. He told them I wasn't qualified to touch the switch." "And what do you think, Miss Morales?" I asked. "You are the trustee. You are the one in charge. Is the data worth saving?" There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the hum of the massive cooling fans in the background, the same fans Vane had tried to sabotage, the same fans that had poisoned her. "Judge," Linda said, "I'm looking at the screens. I see faces. Millions of faces. People who didn't know they were being watched. This machine wasn't learning. It was stealing. It was stealing our lives to sell us things we don't need." She took a breath. "It doesn't deserve to live," she said. "It deserves to be unplugged." "Then you have your order," I said. "Pull it." I wish I could have seen it. I wish I could have seen the moment Linda Morales, the janitor who was fired for being in the wrong room, reached out and silenced the $4 billion noise. "It's done," she said a moment later. The background hum died. The silence on the phone line was heavy, but it was peaceful. "The agents are seizing the drives now. Good work, Miss Morales," I said. "Now, let's talk about the money." The liquidation of Ether Incorporated was swift and brutal. When the FBI revealed the extent of the fraud, the fake engagement numbers, the illegal data harvesting, the safety violations, the stock didn't just drop, it evaporated. The company was worthless overnight. But the physical assets, the buildings, the servers, the furniture, the private accounts Vane had tried to hide, those were still worth millions. And as the judge presiding over the civil seizure, I had first priority on those funds. I convened a final hearing 1 week later. Elias Vane wasn't there. He was in federal custody, awaiting trial without bail. But Marcus Sterling was there, representing the dissolving corporation, looking like a man who just wanted to retire. And Linda Morales was there. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "we have liquidated the available assets. After paying the federal fines and the creditors, there is a remaining balance of $250,000 in the localized operating account. I am issuing a summary judgment." "We have no objection, Your Honor," Sterling mumbled. "The original claim was for $4,500, I said, looking at Linda. "But given the egregious nature of the defendant's conduct, the willful endangerment of the plaintiff, and the fraudulent nature of the dismissal, I am applying punitive damages. I signed the order. It was the best signature of my career. I am awarding the full remaining balance of the operating account to the plaintiff, Miss Linda Morales, as compensation for wrongful termination, medical damages, and emotional distress." Linda gasped. $250,000. It wasn't billions. It wasn't tech CEO money. But for a woman who had been cleaning floors to pay rent, it was a new life. It was justice. "And Mr. Sterling?" I added. "One more thing." "Yes, Your Honor. The court is also seizing the personal vehicle of Mr. Vane, which was parked in the company lot and listed as a corporate asset. A 2024 McLaren. I understand it is worth quite a bit." "It is," Sterling agreed. "Good," I said. "Sell it. And donate the proceeds to the Lung Health Foundation in Miss Morales' name." I stood up. The case was closed. The company was gone. The billionaire was in jail. And the janitor was walking out with a check that would secure her future. I walked back to my chambers, took off my robe, and looked out the window. It was raining. I thought about Elias Vane sitting in his cell, wondering why his algorithm hadn't saved him. He never understood the one variable you can't code for. You can't code for the moment when a person decides they have had enough. But just as I was about to turn off the lights, my clerk knocked on the door. She looked pale. Judge, she said, you need to see the news. It's about Vane. I turned on the TV in my office, and I saw something that made me realize this fight wasn't just about one man. It was about to become a movement. I stared at the television screen in my chambers. The headline didn't say, CEO arrested. It said, The Morals Effect. The reporter was standing outside the federal courthouse. Behind her, there wasn't just a crowd, there was a line of people stretching down the block. They weren't protesters, they were employees, engineers from other tech giants, warehouse workers, data entry clerks, people who had signed NDAs, people who had been bullied into silence by men like Elias Vane. They were holding signs. One of them read, I am a janitor, not a collateral damage. Another read, Pierce the veil. Vane thought he was an outlier. He thought he was a god living among insects. But when the world saw him in handcuffs, when they saw that a municipal judge and a cleaner could take down a $4 billion empire, the fear evaporated. The illusion of invincibility was broken. Vane's arrogance didn't just destroy his own company. It lit a fuse that was blowing up the entire culture of silence in Silicon Valley. 6 months later, the federal trial concluded. Elias Vane didn't have his high-priced lawyers anymore. He had a public defender. He tried to argue that the kill switch was a security feature. The jury didn't buy it. They saw the memo Linda Morales had saved from the trash. The verdict was guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, securities fraud, reckless endangerment. I wasn't there for the sentencing, but I read the transcript. The federal judge gave him 20 years, no parole for at least 17. But the most satisfying part wasn't the number of years. It was the job assignment. In federal prison, every inmate has to work. It's part of the restitution. I heard through the grapevine that Vane tried to get assigned to the library or computer repair. He thought he could still use his genius. The warden denied the request. Instead, Elias Vane, the man who claimed his time was worth $50,000 a minute, was assigned to sanitation. Right now, as you are watching this video, the former CEO of Ether is pushing a mop bucket down a hallway. He is scrubbing floors. He is emptying trash cans. And every time he looks into that bucket, I hope he remembers the woman he fired. I hope he realizes that the work he mocked is the only thing he has left. As for Linda Morales, she didn't retire on that $250,000. She started a nonprofit called the Veil Project. It helps low-level corporate employees pay for legal counsel when they are mistreated by their bosses. She is still the same woman. She still wears that floral dress, but she doesn't walk with her head down anymore. I saw her recently. She stopped by my courtroom just to say hello. She told me something I will never forget. She said, Judge, I used to think the law was a wall that kept people like me out, but you showed me it's actually a door. You just have to be brave enough to knock. I sit on this bench every day. I see liars. I see thieves. I see people who think the world owes them everything. But cases like this, they remind me why I put on the robe. There is a fantasy in our society that if you have enough zeros in your bank account, the rules don't apply to you. People like Elias Vane spend their whole lives building that fantasy. They build walls of money, lawyers, and technology to separate themselves from the consequences of their actions. But here is the truth that Vane learned the hard way. There is no wall high enough to keep out justice. There is no algorithm that can calculate the cost of human dignity. And there is no corporate veil thick enough to hide you when you decide to treat people like trash. Money talks. It screams. It bullies. It bribes. But in my courtroom, when the gavel finally comes down, money goes silent. And justice decides. If you believe that no one is above the law, whether they are a billionaire's son or a tech CEO, then share this story. Let them know that we are watching. And let them know that sooner or later, everyone has to pick up their own mess. My name is Judge Boyd. Court is adjourned.